Christ is King! Christ is King!
Let all that you do be done in love. A Christian, when they see their society collapsing around them, doesn't cower or run in fear. A true man, when he sees a challenge, he rises to the challenge. He digs deep within his own soul to find the strength to do what is necessary to meet the challenge in front of him. The tutelage of our Lord Jesus Christ calls us to bear our cross and to suffer in his way.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are in the world. And we're going to be talking today on this show about Syria, and then we're going to just open it up for anyone who wants to ask or talk about anything else. But we're going to start off with Syria. And so, as always, we'll start with a psalm as a prayer. I'm going to read from Psalm 91. The one who lives under the protection of the Most High dwells in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say concerning Yahweh, who is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. He himself will rescue you from the bird trap, from the destructive plague. He will cover you with his feathers. You will take refuge under his wings. His faithfulness will be a protective shield. You will not fear the terror of the night, the arrow that flies by day, the plague that stalks in darkness, or in the pestilence that ravages at noon. Though 1,000 fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, the pestilence will not reach you. You will only see it with your eyes and witness the punishment of the wicked. Because you have made Yahweh my refuge, the Most High your dwelling place, no harm will come to you. No plague will come near your tent, for he will give his angels orders concerning you, to protect you in all your ways. They will support you with their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the young lion and the serpent. Because he has his heart set on me, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he knows my name. When he calls out to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and give him honor. I will satisfy him with a long life and show him my salvation. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So the first thing that I would want to say is that, as a Christian reflecting on this and what's recently happened in the news with the what appears to be the total capture of the Syria, the Bashar al-Assad strongholds by the Islamist, I think they're called HTS group, is that Bashar al-Assad was no friend to Christians. When he occupied Lebanon, he murdered Christians, he bombed Christians, he took Christians prisoners. And so this is not a dictator that was friendly to Christians. He was quite deadly to Christians, and particularly weakening Lebanese Christians once Lebanon was occupied by Syria, ostensibly to end the civil war. Now, that being said, for the Christians of Syria, he was a lot better an option than what has now taken its place. We've essentially got rid of a bloody savage dictator, and what we now have running the capital, at least, but not in any way running the whole of Syria, what we now have running parts of Syria is a bloody savage Islamist. This is, it doesn't matter what they say. This whole Islamist movement, and it is an Islamist movement, was born of ISIS, was friends of Al-Qaeda, and now has become its own Islamist bloc. And it doesn't matter what they say about looking after minorities, they are just lying to the West. Islam has hard-baked into its DNA the persecution and oppression of Christians. And so when you see a group that says they want to govern by Sharia law, that means that they're going to want to make Christians dhimmis, which means that Christians will be second-class citizens under this Sharia law. And we shouldn't underestimate just what a threat these Islamists will pose to us, because Bashar al-Assad had stockpiles of chemical weapons, which one presumes now might be at the disposal of these Islamists themselves. And who knows who they will give those weapons to and for what purposes. And so for the West to think that this is just some kind of a shoe that's going to stay in Syria is, I think, in the long run, going to be proven wrong. Now, Russia, because of its involvement in Ukraine, because Putin and the Russian elites worship the God of Russia, not the God of Christ, were unable to back up Bashar al-Assad properly as they had done before. And it doesn't surprise me, it wouldn't surprise me if the reason why Russia stepped back and allowed this to happen to Bashar al-Assad is because Turkey has reassured them that their two military bases in Syria can stay. One of which is, I believe, Russia's only warm water port, and the other one is a military base. So giving them a toehold in the Eastern Mediterranean. And because of their involvement in Ukraine and in killing their own Orthodox brothers and sisters, they've been unable to safeguard their own interests in Syria. But they were never concerned to safeguard the Christian community in Syria. Their involvement was only ever about the military bases. And Trump, because his God is America and not the God of Jesus Christ, has already stated on social media that he is not interested in this problem. He sees it as a Syrian problem for Syrians to sort out, and it's not for him to be getting America involved. In other words, nationalism has meant that two ostensibly Christian leaders have both thrown the Christian community to the wolves. And I'm just wondering how many examples of this that needs to be pointed out to people before they recognize that nationalism makes the church weaker, and it leads to the betrayal and the failure of Christian to serve Christian, of Christian to back Christian. With an ostensibly Christian president and an ostensible of America and of Russia, then surely these two great powers could have intervened for the persecution of, or to prevent the oppression of Christians, which is now going to follow in Syria. After all, Biden did move an entire fleet into the Mediterranean to give Israel backup. Now, also, this overlooks the fact that in Ankara, in Turkey, we've got a Islamist government under Erdogan who is seeking to expand Turkey's influence across the Middle East and the Mediterranean, because he, like some people here in the UK, dream about re-establishing the Ottoman Empire. And his and this allows him to gain influence in huge swathes of Syria, which will now be, to some degree, subject to Erdogan, which I suspect might also be another reason why the West is tempted to look the other way, because for whatever reason, our Western governments persistently seem to be frightened to stand up to Turkey. And one of the big losers of this situation is the Kurds. The Kurds, who have desperately tried to show themselves to be allies of the West, have once again been let down by the West. And, you know, if there's any group of people that deserve their own country, it's the Kurds. And we should be supporting a Kurdish state. We should recognize that Turkey has been committing genocide against the Kurds. Why hasn't the ICC brought out charges against Erdogan for his treatment of the Kurds? And that's not to say that I'm blind to the fact that the Kurds have brutalized and hurt the Assyrian Christians. But I stand by the fact that the Assyrian Christians also need their own country, free from Kurdish control as well, because Kurds aren't innocent. However, on the grand scale of things, they're not the worst group out there, and so we should support both a Kurdish and Assyrian independent or autonomous regions. And I just want to say to the Kurds, you know, the Muslims are killing you. The Muslims are slaughtering you. The Muslims are oppressing you. And the Christians are the ones that are speaking up for you. Let that factor in as you choose your religion. Let that factor in as you think about where right and wrong belong and where truth and falsehood are. Let that fact influence you, because if you want to stab your Turkish oppressors in the heart, if you want to stab your Iraqi oppressors in the heart, the best way that you can do it is through a mass conversion to Christ, where you will see the Assyrians not as some kind of enemies, but brothers in the faith. And this, unfortunately, is not, I don't think, is going to stay in Syria as much as everybody might want it to. Because whatever happens in Syria affects Lebanon. And the Christians in Syria, I don't think have much of a future in Syria. But I do think if the Lebanese Maronite Christians would be willing to think long term, the only way that the Lebanese Maronite Christians can have a sustainable Christian state in Syria is to basically invite the Christians of the Middle East and North Africa to come and live in your country. And with those people, take over your country. Take it back from Hezbollah. Right now, Hezbollah is crippled, but there is no better time to take back Lebanon from Hezbollah than this moment. And the Syrians of the Syrian Christians of Syria, I would say, move en masse to Lebanon and help them build a Christian state, help them free their land from Hezbollah. And any kind of redrawing of the map of Syria, because I think that ultimately is what's going to happen. I think that there has to be a redrawing of the map. It cannot ignore the fact that the Christians deserve, at the very least, an autonomous region on the borders with Lebanon, in alignment geographically to where the Christian populations of Lebanon are, which I believe is in North Lebanon, though I'm not a specialist, so someone else can correct me on that. And because there are so many different vested interests wrapped up in Syria at the moment. You've got Russian, you've got Iranian, you've got American, you've got Israeli, You've got the Syrians themselves, you've got the Syrian Islamists, you've got the Syrian Kurds, you've got the Syrian Druze, you've got the Syrian Christians. That really, I think the only way to make peace or to have some kind of peace in Syria is for the map to be redrawn so that the Druze get their own state, the Kurds get their own state, the Alawites get their own state, the Christians get their own state, and the Sunnis get their own state. And then, let them see who can govern best. Now, Syria has basically been torn apart by global politics. It was internationalized as a country and then ripped to pieces. And I want to point out to the West again, not that people listen to this, but all the ingredients for a civil war are multiple ethnicities, multiple ideologies, and then a catalyst. Every civil war that has ever been fought has been fought with those ingredients. And the liberals have created those ingredients right across the Western world. We need to wake up to the danger that we've created in the West through liberal politics. Now, there's no doubt about it in my mind that the Christians of the Middle East need their own country. This needs to become a refrain for Christians around the world. It needs to become a cause de célèbre of Christians around the world, that Christians in the Middle East need their own country. I think the most likely place that country could be is Lebanon. And the Maronite Christians, if you think strategically, you could help to build that country by inviting Christians from around the world, from around the Middle East and from around North Africa to come and settle in amongst you and help you build a Lebanon. And the world should work together to create a Lebanon that is free of Hezbollah. And if Israel wants to secure its northern border, then work with the Christians in Lebanon to free themselves from Islamist occupation. And so that the Christians run Lebanon for Christians. And I guarantee to all that might watch in Israel that you will have peace on your northern border and that Lebanon will become a Singapore of the Mediterranean. And this draws out something that Christians cannot afford their divisions. We can't afford our divisions amongst one another. Sectarianism literally defeats the church in a very real world setting. And Christians need to put whatever dogmatic or ecclesiastical, jurisdictional, or sectarian divisions on the back burner, so that we can deal with a far more prominent threat to us all. And I appeal to Chris, and one of the ways that we can do that is just by recognizing that we are all part of the people of God, and that the people of God comes before any institutions. Now, you've got this. You've got now two of the groups that are key to this whole chess set that's happening in the Middle East. Is obviously Israel and Iran, and Iran has devoted itself to an ideology of hatred against the Jewish people. Not the Iranian people have done that, but the Iranian regime has done that, and their whole plan is now crumbling right in front of them. And Israel is now coming out the stronger. I believe that it has now retaken the Golan Heights, because the government that it made the peace with no longer exists. So the Golan Heights, I believe, and maybe correct me if I've got this wrong, are now back under the control of Israel. which is going to strategically help them both to defend Israel against any future Islamist incursions, but also in any struggle for future struggles against Hezbollah. I don't blame them. It is the strategical thing to do. And if they haven't done it, I would advise Israel to retake the Golan Heights. But at the point that sets up possibly a new conflict in the future, when if there is one unified Syrian state, has a Syrian government, will want those Golan Heights back. I just want to appeal to Israel to work with the Christians of the Middle East. They're not your enemy. And if you work with them, they can be a means by which peace is created. They just need to be the ones running the shop. And so that is something that could definitely happen in Lebanon. And maybe also in Gaza, after you've finished getting rid of Hamas. Why not encourage Christians to move into Gaza and put those Christians in charge of everything? And I guarantee if Christians were the ones running Gaza, you would have peace in Gaza. Now, the thing that no one seems to have strung together yet is that we have this global Islamic insurgency that is growing. We have Islamist movements in Somalia, in North Sudan, in North Nigeria, in Algeria, in the Palestinian authorities, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iran, in Afghanistan, and in a multiple number of other places, active in the Philippines, active in Pakistan and in Kashmir, active in Congo, amongst a number of other places. And yet we haven't, in the Western mind, in the Western perspective, drawn together the fact that we have this series of toppling governments where Islamist governments are being set up in their stead, like in Afghanistan, now in Syria. It is an Islamic revolution that is taking territory. If we keep allowing this to happen, those Islamist governments will start to work together against us. Now, Russia is too blinded by its hatred of and frustration out of its failures to see that it has now got into bed with all of the enemies of the church. It's in bed with Iran. It's in bed with North Korea. It's in bed with China. It's in bed with Afghanistan. Because it's so frustrated about how it hasn't done well in history, particularly recent history, that it's now attacking all of its Christian neighbors and getting into bed with the enemies of Christians. And I appeal to Russian Orthodox to wake up to that fact. Putin is no hero of orthodoxy. The problem with Christians, when we have Christians in power, is we have no Christian political vision. We have no Christian aspiration as to what we want to move a society towards. And I want to say that the only Christian political vision that is accurate to Scripture and the faith is one of Christendom. Christians need to commit to Christendom. Christendom, a muscular Christian civilization, is the answer to the cancer of liberalism. It is the answer to the threat of Islamism. Liberalism has demonstrably failed to restrain Islamism, and Islamism will just keep taking ground. Will just keep taking ground. And so we as Christians need to commit ourselves to a Christian vision of civilization. And that means we've got to commit ourselves to the idea of a Christendom, a socio-economic, political, and cultural and religious reality in which Christianity is the governing narrative in all spheres of life. And we need to also recognize that Turkey is no ally of the West. They are no ally of Britain. They're no ally of America. Why do we keep pretending that they are? And finally, and this is, I think, one of the reasons actually why Turkey deliberately pushed this, is because Turkey holds millions of, at least 1 million Syrian refugees, and it's causing problems within Erdogan's Turkey, is that we've seen in all of our Western countries, Syrian refugees celebrating an Islamist victory on the streets. Now, the first thing is, in those countries like in the UK, where it is illegal to openly support Islamist terrorism and an Islamist organization, why aren't those people that have been celebrating on the street being arrested? Why are they not being arrested? And secondly, why is it that none of the chattering classes and all the social media commentators and all the news commentators not put two and two together and recognized that if they are willing to celebrate an Islamist victory abroad, why wouldn't they celebrate an Islamist victory at home? If they're willing to support Islamist actions abroad, why wouldn't they support Islamist actions at home? If they're willing to support Islamists abroad, why wouldn't they support Islamists at home? Why has our entire political class not clicked onto this? And if they have clicked onto this, why haven't they acted on it? Every one of those refugees that have been found to be celebrating this Islamist victory should immediately be sent to Syria. They are clearly safe. They are on the winning side. Their side has won. They no longer have nothing to fear. They are supportive of this Islamist movement. They now need to be sent off to that Islamist movement. And if we don't do that, then more the fool the West. And unfortunately, the liberals are the fools that are killing us all. And so we, as the West, must reject liberalism. We must end our connection to liberalism, and we must hack our way off into a new direction.
Svetu